Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss one of the biggest results of the general election, which is, should there be a Scottish independence referendum again? The answer is almost certainly yes, and I'd like to go over the reasons for that, but also the likelihood of it happening and roughly when it could happen. But first, if you'd like to see more of my videos, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, from my point of view, first of all, I do not want the union to break up. I think we are all much better off together. But that being said, it's not my decision. I'm not Scottish and I don't live in Scotland. So it really is for the people of Scotland. And there are four compelling reasons, four reasons I will go over for which there absolutely should be another Scottish referendum, even though we had one just a few years ago, and I don't want another one, but not for what I want. The first is that earlier this year, there was a poll conducted, as there regularly are, and this wasn't a poll conducted by the Scottish Nationalist Party. This was actually conducted by, a Conservative, and it found that there was probably a little over, but probably over 50% that would vote in favour of Scottish independence. Now, within a source of error, that doesn't mean to say there would definitely be a vote for independence if it happened, but there was certainly an indication. And when you have an indication in a poll, on an issue such as this, you probably ought to follow up on it. I mean, it needs to be for people to determine their own government. And if the people of Scotland say, we do not want to be part of the UK, then it should be as simple as that. As it is by law for the people of Northern Ireland, by law, if there were an indication that the people of Northern Ireland would vote for reunification with the Republic of Ireland, by law, there has to be a poll. It should really apply everywhere, shouldn't it? It should. But that's the first one. Now, that is the weakest argument. And the reason for that is not just because it was showing a narrow increase. Further polls have been conducted throughout the year, and very recently, like literally a week ago or something, very recently another poll suggested that support had dropped below 50% and quite a bit below 50% as well. However, what I would say, and I know what loads of Scottish nationalists will be screaming at me, that was before the general election result. Absolutely it was, yes. Absolutely it was. And it may be that many of those people felt that Boris Johnson would not be returned with a majority, even though, as I was talking about earlier today, polls did predict it. But that is absolutely a reason. And that's the thing with statistics. You do have to look at possible explanations for results. You don't just look at results and imagine it means what you think it means, or want it to mean, more importantly. But there are three other very compelling reasons. The second one is to do with the general election results. In case people hadn't noticed, the SNP, which is a party that has a number of policies, obviously it's active in the Scottish Parliament, but nonetheless, what does it stand for? It stands for Scottish independence. That is what it stands for. If you are a member of the SNP, you want Scottish independence. If you vote for the SNP, you are voting for Scottish independence. The SNP have almost all the seats in Scotland. They were predicted to do well. They did bloody well. They have 4 out of 5 seats in Scotland are the SNP's seats. That is, again, it doesn't say, no one's saying that over half the people in Scotland voted for the SNP. That's not the case. But it does nonetheless, it's an indicator that there is a groundswell for Scottish independence, possibly. And it's certainly another indicator. You can't ignore a massive increase in the number of seats going to Scottish nationalists when it comes to an issue such as this. The third thing is that Brexit now is definitely going to happen. We don't know what form of Brexit, but it makes no difference. Scotland voted significantly against Brexit in the 2016 referendum. Scotland does not want Brexit, it never did. Now, although people have increasingly turned against Brexit everywhere else in the UK, including in England, with Scotland it was never there. And resistance to Brexit has increased as it has through the rest of the UK as well. Scotland does not want to leave the EU, which means that we are, it's not me personally, but the UK government is going to force a massive constitutional change on all parts of Britain, because no part of the UK actually wants it anymore. But it's going to force massive constitutional change on a part of the UK where even officially people cannot say that they're in favour of it. And as a result, you really should go to the polls on whether they would rather leave the UK altogether than put up with this. I keep hesitating there because I really don't want this result, but at the same time you can't argue against the moral argument for it. And the fourth one, and this for me is the clincher. If none of the others applied, this would still apply. During the actual Scottish referendum a few years ago, there were a number of reasons for staying in the Union given. One of the biggest ones, one of the ones that was trumpeted from the rooftops, was that in the UK, Scotland has a seat at the top table, or one of the 3 top tables in the EU. They have a powerful voice in the EU. They're not just in the EU, because independently they could apply to join the EU, but they have a powerful voice in the EU. Brexit is not just likely to happen now, it is now certain. Certain, and it's certain to happen very soon. Although the impact won't be felt for some time, it is now definite. As a result, one of the central arguments for remaining in the Union is gone. It doesn't exist. Which means that the referendum result itself is invalid. And that's the problem with Britain, isn't it, when it comes to these things? We're not very good at understanding validity of public polls, but it is invalid. And if a referendum is invalid in other countries where they run it again. And so for no other reason, I would say definitely that. So the actual argument for it is overwhelming, sadly. But is it going to happen? Obviously, Boris Johnson talks a lot about democracy. He doesn't care about democracy in the slightest. Not in the slightest. He would, however, definitely want that referendum to go ahead. I'll explain. Boris Johnson, to retain power, needs a majority in Parliament. He has a massive majority in Parliament now. But that was not definitely going to happen, and it wouldn't definitely happen at the next election, even though he is going to rig the next election by changing the constituency boundaries. But whatever, it's not guaranteed. He needs a majority to retain power. Scotland hinders his chances of getting a majority. The reason is Scotland, even when it's doing well, always has fewer than half the seats in Scotland. That means it's harder for him to get a majority. If Scotland were to disappear and take all its seats from Westminster with it, he wouldn't need anywhere near as many seats to get over half. At the moment, they have 3 seats in Scotland out of about 50. No, it's more than 50. I can't remember exactly. It's about 60-ish. They have 3. That's no good. Even when they're doing better, they don't have anywhere near a majority. So if Scotland left, he would find it easier. Conservatives in general would find it easier to get a majority. So pragmatic Conservatives, ones who just want power, will absolutely not want Scotland in the UK. That being said, the Conservative Party, the full name of it is the Conservative and Union Party. They are, or Unionist Party. They are supposed to fight for the Union. A lot of their supporters would not be in favour of Boris Johnson turning around saying, yeah, you should have a referendum. Otherwise, he would absolutely do it. There would be a referendum within 6 months, I guarantee. So he's had to promise not to allow another referendum. He's had to do that. So that means that there won't be one soon. But there will, of course, be a bigger push for it. Joanna Cherry, for example, QC, who is an SNP MP, she was one of the driving forces behind the legal action against Boris Johnson in the last Parliament. She has said that she'll be turning her legal mind towards stopping Boris Johnson stuffing over Scotland, basically. The implication being trying to find legal ways of getting a referendum. Obviously, the Scottish Parliament will vote in favour of it, but we don't want to end up with a situation where it ends up being like Catalan within Spain, where it turns very nasty, and I don't believe it will. I believe that, although I don't agree with the SNP stance, I do believe that they are responsible politicians, and we're not going to see any nonsense like that, but they will work on pressurising the UK government to allow another referendum. I think as well Boris Johnson wants one, and I think he will work on ways of allowing one to happen. All he wants to do is avoid blame for it. He will want it. He will want it. I just think he wants to avoid blame. And even on this particular case, even his backers would want it, because if Scotland leaves the Union, it becomes so much easier to keep getting Conservative governments in power. So those are my thoughts. I definitely think there is an argument for it. And I also think it would happen. I would just suggest to Scottish nationalists, you are patient. It should happen quite soon. Morally speaking, it won't. But I think it will happen. And I think it will happen within a few years. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then also please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.